Hello everyone and welcome along to your Wednesday edition of the TII podcast. I almost said Monday there, I'm so used to being on Mondays throughout the season, but it is in fact Wednesday, and I'm joined this evening to talk about the latest Rangers news, the latest Rangers rumours and all things transfers as well. So I'm joined tonight by Andy. How you doing, Andy?
Very well indeed. Not been on in a wee while, so looking forward to getting right into it. Close season it may be, but there's still plenty to talk about.
Absolutely, and it's nice to see you back in the pod as well. And we're also joined by Scott Cameron. How you doing, Scott?
Very good, mate. It's been feels like ages since I've last been on, and it's just good to be back on after a short break. You know, plenty to talk about as always.
Absolutely, it's never a quiet day in the world of Rangers Football Club, and today is absolutely no different. Great to see so many people in the comments already. Please leave your thoughts in there. We'll try and bring up as much and as many as we can, and we'll talk through all sorts of opinions around. We're going to look at the sort of sporting director position. We're going to speak about the twist in the Malik Tillman transfer saga, and we'll also start to look at and delve a bit deeper into Rangers forward line, because I don't think it's anywhere near where any of us want it to be. So we'll delve into where we need to really focus, or where we hope the club are focusing in the next few weeks or so as we head towards the start of the competitive games, and we'll also look at who we think should be nowhere near that squad come the start of the season as well. So plenty to get our teeth stuck into, but I'll start with yourself, Andy. We'll start with looking at news that we've seen kind of developing over the last few days. Rangers sporting director appointment, apparently still some way off, looking to fill the position that was left by Ross Wilson. By all accounts, it seems to be that we're trying to change the position a little bit, so the person coming in won't have exactly the same role as Ross Wilson had, although do we actually know what Ross Wilson's full role was? We've reportedly spoken to Carlos Bocanegra and Christian Nellinger. Since we're going through old players, I hope they're speaking to Davy Weir at Brighton as well, but I think it's a bit pie in the sky for that one. I believe John Park and Michael Beale will be playing a more major role in transfers going forward. It does seem like a different approach to Ross Wilson. Andy, how important is it the club gets this appointment right?
Oh, it's crucial. It's absolutely crucial, especially in a summer with what we all know is going to be a quite a considerable rebuild. I think it's important to get it right. I was hoping for it to be a wee bit quicker than this and have something in place as early as we could. That's not been the case, but it probably is more important to get it right. You're right what you say. There's nobody knows Ross Wilson's full remit from the role that he left, and there probably is going to be some changes to that. I'm interested to see exactly how much Beale takes to do with that side of Ross Wilson's job. But the last quote I've seen from Michael Beale was that he's happy to do it, albeit he's a hell of a lot more busy, which is obvious. I'm also a great believer in the manager should have a massive say in who comes to the club signing wise. It should be really his remit as well. You know, if you scour social media, you'll see people of my age and a few others saying there's no need for a director of football. Never used to have directors of football and all the rest of it. I don't buy that. I think there is a need for it there. Continuity of the football club is massive. You only have to think back to when Gerrard left. Quite surprisingly, Gerrard left, and Ross Wilson came out and stated that he had 4 or 5 names already because he was always planning ahead. I think that's very, very important. It probably goes under the radar, that kind of thing that the director of football does, if you know what I mean. So I think it's very important to get it right. I would like to see it as soon as possible. However, I don't think that's going to happen. Concentrate on getting it right first and foremost.
Scott, Andy picked up on a good point there in terms of no one's quite sure what I was about to say what Michael Beale's job is. I think everyone knows what Michael Beale's job is. No one's quite sure what Ross Wilson's remit was from that perspective, but it is really important that the club get it right. I also think that Michael Beale having a bigger say in the transfers. I don't doubt for a second that it was just Ross Wilson that was buying all the players and saying, here you go, to the manager. I think it was very much a team effort, probably John Park involved in there as well, if not a couple of others. How are you happy that the manager might have more of a say in transfers going forward than in terms of the appointment? Andy spoke about it taking a while. Do you think it's one of these ones that's maybe taking a bit of a backseat where we get on-field matters sorted in the course season?
I'm surprised it's taken quite as long. I must admit, I'm a great believer in succession planning, but I think there's been an awful lot of change within the board and the football club as a whole, and I think that's potentially. I don't know what Ross Wilson has left behind. So, Craig Mulholland's obviously left as well. I think it is important that we get the right appointment. Who that is, who knows? I think Ross Wilson, from the outside looking in, I thought it felt as if he had too much control, if that makes sense. I think you have to have somebody, a sort of figurehead, for wanting a better expression. But I think they might split responsibilities, so potentially John Park might get a bit more responsibility than whoever comes in. I mean, I think Steve Morrow was another one I seen mentioned that I think had been at Arsenal and the English FA. But I think it's important that Michael Beale doesn't just get handed players and say, right. I mean, that's what happens on the continent at a lot of clubs. There's your number 9. Get on with it. There's your centre midfield player. And I think Michael Beale has to have input. The recruitment team and the scouts and what have you, they do their job. They present the players to Michael Beale, and then they work through the list. I mean, it's a team. It isn't just the responsibility of Michael Beale or Ross Wilson or Davy Weir or whoever it may be. I think they have to work collaboratively to get. But I would hope that at some point during July, it would be good, certainly by the start of the season, to have somebody in place.
Yeah, I absolutely would. The sporting director or director of football, whichever title they go under, it's very difficult to know who's in the frame for it, because a lot of these guys fly under the radar. Yes, you've got quite a few ex-players sitting in these kind of roles as well, but a lot of them do fly under the radar. Scott, are there any names that that you've heard, for example, that stick out to you, or is it one we just have to trust whoever the board pick?
To be honest with you, I think we have as a support, I think we have a love for bringing back old players. Whether it's to, last couple of days, Joe Aribo, Calvin Bassey, to come back to play. We seem to have the same fixation when it comes to like major appointments within the football club. I mean, it wasn't a matter of weeks ago that Graham Souness was mooted by certain people to come back and take a role within the club. Graham Souness has been away for 30 years. I just want somebody that's good at their job and communicates well. And I think it's important, whoever gets the job, that the club, I'm not saying we hand out the job description. We send out a PDF document to everybody in the Rangers database and say this is the responsibility of the person that's came in. But I think some sort of, I've said it in our group chat, I think some sort of, I'm not saying day in the life, but a Q&A, something online. Just, I think we're trying to improve the communication aspect with the support, and I think this change over the summer with Craig Mulholland's replacement, Ross Wilson's replacement, I think it's a good opportunity to actually define what people do, so that the public perception of it is accurate.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've mentioned that the club are trying to improve communication with fans, and it's perfect night to, I guess, highlight that, because they are in fact holding the first CEO fans forum with James Bisgrove, and I think there was 9 people from the club in attendance on the stage. Ross and Kyle are both in attendance there, and we're hoping, timing allowing, that towards the end of the podcast, that one of them will be able to join us and talk us through the key points from the fan forum and where the real discussions were had. So fingers crossed they'll be able to join us towards the end of the show. Andy, back onto on-field matters. We heard yesterday, perhaps the day before, all the days are kind of merging into one at this moment in time, given the heat. Malik Tillman will not be joining Rangers. It was confirmed, a bit of a strange one, as it appears that Bayern cancelled Rangers' option on the deal. Rangers will receive £1 million plus 10% of any future deal as compensation for this. Reports say that interest is huge from England, Germany, and elsewhere, with bids of over £10 million expected. Firstly, how do you, before we get into the machinations, I guess, of the deal itself, and kind of it's a bit like one that I've not heard of before, but before we get into discussing that, how do you feel about Tillman not returning?
Disappointed, I suppose. Disappointed. I thought he was a good player. He scored important goals for us, Champions League included. He scored good goals for us. You could see he was a good young talent is what he is. He's going to go places. He really is going to go places. I can't get out of my head the amount of times I argued with people, though, about him not turning up against Celtic or even Aberdeen at Hampden. That was disappointing. But the boy's only 20 years old. You can give him a buy on that if you like. He's definitely got the quality there to make it. So if you were to put my head in a vice and say, do we buy him or do we not, I probably would have bought him for the $5 million. If it went to 6, then fine. I think that's going to be good business in the long run. However, you can't get away from the fact we're quite heavy in that area, I think, anyway. I think you've still got Lawrence, you've got Hadji, you've got Lowry, you've got Cantwell can play there. So is 6 million too dear for a luxury that we perhaps don't need? Maybe. But the quality is there. His quality is there and it's not in doubt. So to answer your question, him not coming is disappointing, but we move on. It's as simple as that. It's not as disappointing because of the deal we're just about to talk about, which I was very surprised by.
Yeah, it's already a topic that's had plenty of comments coming in since the start of the show. RFC 56 kicking us off with, we had a deal to offer him a contract and they bullied us, but some fans are happy. What else we got here? WATP saying, so Bayern Munich will give Rangers £2 million compensation for cancelling the buy deal. I think it's £1 million plus 10% of whatever he is sold for. If the reports are correct and deals are saying it's £10 million plus for that has been offered, then I guess you're right to assume it'll be around the £2 million mark. One more, James Quinn says, money for Tillman and 10% sell on. Can't argue with that, considering his age. Scott, firstly on Tillman himself, are you disappointed that he won't be returning next season?
Well, listen, I thought he'd done everything you would want during a loan. Apart from Andy quite rightly spoke about the bigger games, but I think at the start of the season he was key to us getting into the Champions League. So for that point of view, I wouldn't say disappointed. Wasn't surprised. Towards the latter part of the season, there was a lot of media talk where he was quite diplomatic in his responses. I think they're talking about Bayern cancelling the deal, but I think Malik Tillman would have had input with regard to, I think the player has to want to come. And I don't believe that at any point Malik Tillman saw a permanent transfer to Rangers on his list, to be honest with you. I think he wanted to, he said what he had to say when he was at Rangers, done his best across the season. But he's a Bayern player. It's get out, get games, make yourself a better player, get competitive football. He's ticked that box. He's went back and potentially the negotiations or chat has happened, and I think he's maybe said, "Nah, don't fancy it." And we'll never know the intricacies of it. But I wish him well. And see, to be honest with you, I thought he was going back to Bayern and we were getting nothing. So the fact that Ross Wilson has potentially negotiated this within the contract a year ago, that we may actually profit from it. You know, I can't see anything. I can't see anything negative at all with it.
Yeah, I have to say, I never quite got the impression that he actually wanted to stay. Whenever he was asked about his future, he was always very non-committal and saying, "Well, it's up to Bayern and it's up to Rangers." I never got the impression that he'd fully bought into Rangers and the idea that his future could lie there. I think he probably thinks his future's at a club in one of the top 5 leagues. And can you disagree with him? Probably not. He actually, the way that football's played in many of those leagues, you get a wee bit more time in the ball, and you're with, in many cases, players who are of a higher caliber. So I think he will probably see his future there. If it's not at Bayern, it'll be, I think, one of the clubs I saw mentioned was sort of Brighton, who are up in the sort of the higher end of the English Premier League. I saw Borussia Mönchengladbach mentioned as well, who are always a decent team to watch. So I never got the impression that he was committed to continuing at Rangers after this season. And while he progressed a lot over this year, I don't think he ever set the heather alight outside of that one run against Motherwell, perhaps. Was the only time that shone through, and that was some terrible defending on that side of things as well. But I think in terms of comments coming in, there's still plenty on this one. Everyone's got an opinion on Malik Tillman. Reese saying great business on Tillman. RFC 56 saying wasted year on Tillman for 1 million, could have played their own players. RFC 56 continuing that thought, if we signed him we could have got 15, but Bayern took the piss out of us. I'm not sure we could have commanded a fee of £15 million for Malik Tillman at that age, but I like the idea of charging high fees for our players, because it's not something we do enough. We don't maximise the value that we have in our players. Marlon Brando's eyes, I don't understand how he can command that fee. For us to have potentially shelled out £5 million on a guy with too much of a question mark over him would have been daft, and there is a doubt over his quality. Andy, what do you make of those comments, and in particular that last one? £5 million would have been a big outlay for us this summer, and it was something that we as fans, I guess, and on this podcast as well, all sort of battled back and forward on whether we felt it was worth that money. Do you think it's just a case of other teams such as Brighton, Brentford, teams in the top 5 leagues have a bit more money to play with, and £10 million to them isn't as much as £5 million is to us?
Yes, that's exactly what I think. I don't think there's as much doubt as the last commenter makes out over his quality. He's definitely got quality there. There's doubt over a couple of things, potentially show up in big games, etc. As we went over. I don't think there's doubt over his quality. He's definitely got quality. He's going to end up in England or a top 2, top 3 in Germany. He's that good, and he's only 20. We keep repeating it. He's only 20 years of age. He's only going to get better. Scott hit the nail on the head as well. We got exactly what we expected to get out of him. A good season. He showed that he's got quality. He's came from Germany. And that's pretty much it. I'm going to be disappointed not to get him. I will pick up on what you said, though, Craig. You said that he never really once committed or didn't commit to signing for Rangers. What made me think that he did get it a wee bit, was he flew over. He flew over personally for the Player of the Year awards, which made me think, you know what, maybe he does fancy it here, and then that's a completely different conversation then. If you think he fancies it, is he worth the money? Is he worth that? It's not a gamble at £5 million. He's only going to go up in price, isn't he, really? He's not going to come down from there. So that would have made me think again. But we just have to get over it. We're not going to get him. If Ross Wilson's put this clause into the contract, which none of us seen coming, then that's fantastic. To get a couple of £1 million for a player who we don't own, who got us to the Champions League, I put that in the win column and move on. That's my opinion.
Scott, I know that we've spoken about the structure of the deal in terms of the £1 million fee. I guess that's as a payoff to say, let us cancel it, and here's a bit of cash. The 10% of whatever he's sold for as well is a bit of a sweetener for that. Ultimately, it's going to be around the £2 million mark for a player that was never actually ours, which on the face of it does seem quite a good deal. Were you surprised to hear about this structure? It seems a weird one. It's not one I've heard of before. It's a lot of fans are sceptical about it, I think it's fair to say, and whether it was Malik Tillman who decided he didn't want to come to us, whether Bayern Munich thought we can get more money if we go elsewhere and sell him, or whether Rangers weren't able to stump up. I think they'd pay the £5 million up front, and not whether Rangers didn't want to do that and were trying to restructure the deal and have managed to kind of save face a little bit. How do you view that?
It was, I mean, when it broke yesterday morning, I was just like, I've heard the loans with an option to buy, I've heard the loans with an obligation to buy, etc., etc., but I've never heard of a situation where the parent club, Bayern, can cancel the deal. I don't know if it's the sort of question that somebody might ask tonight. I don't know if it's something that might come up at the AGM later in the year. We'll never know the intricacies of the whole thing, but I just think it's to get any sort of money for a player that wasn't ours. I think you can't be sniffed at. And I mean, I've tried to keep an eye. The comments are going mental, and it's like, see, not to labour the point, I don't think he fancied another season of plastic pitches, 4 times a season, etc., etc. Scottish football for Michael Beale and the people involved in recruitment is a hard sell. Rangers are a massive, massive football club. We play European football, but Malik Tillman would want to be involved in the Copa America. He'll want to be involved in the World Cup. He's not in the national side at the moment. They're all factors. We don't get it because ultimately all we care about is Rangers and how we do. We think that everybody should want to come, but I think that's the overriding thing with regard to Malik Tillman is he just thinks he'll have better options, and I think the next few weeks will show. But I think we've done a good deal where what has been put into the public domain. If that is to be believed, I think it's Rangers have done well there, particularly Ross Wilson, because I would assume it's been something that has been agreed prior to him leaving.
Andy Scott thinks it's a good deal for Rangers. Do you agree with that?
Definitely. He summed it up with one sentence. We got 1 million, potentially 2, potentially more for a player that wasn't ours. I don't think it's a massive big clause in a contract here. It could be something as simple as a bylaw, if you like, that Rangers have got first refusal, but if we take that off, you will give you some money. It really is as simple as that. And Munich have thought we'll get more money out of this by giving Rangers £1 million. It's basic maths, so it's great for Rangers. Does it set a precedent for future loans? Possibly. But if we can make benefit of that by getting players from Bayern Munich and Dortmund and places like these, give them a platform in European football that they probably wouldn't get at their parent club, showcase their skills, go back to their parent club, move on, and we get some money, I'll take it.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that one. In terms of, I'll stick with you, Andy, for this one. We spoke about how each of us felt about Tillman not returning. We spoke about the fact that we didn't feel he turned up in the bigger games, apart from the Champions League qualifying was the only outlier. And in that one, how big a miss in terms of the way Rangers play, in terms of the style of football, in terms of the creativity that he offered, how big a miss will Malik Tillman be for Rangers this coming season?
As it stands, not a massive miss, because we don't know exactly the system that Beale's going to play yet. We'll get into it in the third point in your agenda, Craig, I'm quite sure, when it comes to striking options. That's going to be massively important to who sits in the role that Lawrence, Cantwell, Hadji, Tillman can play. As it stands, the tail end of last season, to lose him would have been massive, would have been absolutely massive, but you can make no excuses about it. The team needs massive revamp. We're going to get that. Tillman's not going to be a part of that. So you're now relying on Lawrence, Cantwell, Hadji to do the job that Tillman has been doing. But that only depends on who he buys to play up front. Now, we're going to get onto that, and it's going to be a long and laboured debate, and one that I hope isn't going to last as long as some of these signings quite often do. You know, they drag on. Beale's on record saying that he wants the majority, and he's got 4 or 5 in already, which is great. He wants the majority of his new signings in prior to pre-season. That's only 8 or 9 days away, and he has got 4 or 5 in. He's as good as his word. But are they 4 or 5 going to change the complexion of that whole 11? I don't think so. So to lose Tillman, yes, it's big, but he is replaceable. He's worth some money, but he's not irreplaceable.
Yeah, Scott, I'd be interested in your thoughts on that one in terms of how big a miss or not a miss you think Malik Tillman will be going into the next season, and also interested in RFC 56's question here, which says, do you think we'll sign players with a kid-on option to buy again like Tillman? Let's take the kid-on word out of that and say, do you think that the route of loan with option to buy is one that we will start to see more and more as this season and future seasons progress?
I think so. I mean, to be honest, I'm not a huge fan of developing other clubs' players, to be perfectly honest with you. You know, it was mentioned on a few occasions about Billy Gilmour at points last season when he wasn't getting a game down at even when he was at Chelsea. It was mooted, you know, and I was like, well, what's the point of him coming to Rangers and us developing them? Then he goes back. I always think that it has to be a realistic option that you might get the player at the end of it. You don't really know. To be perfectly honest with you, I'd rather it was permanent deals as much as possible with the best available quality that we can bring in. Tillman will be missed from the regard we are sadly lacking goals in the team. I'm not sure his numbers, 10, 12, something along those lines. I'm sure he scored across the season X amount of assists, so potentially say 20 goal involvements. That's what needs to be replaced, you know. And Sam Lammers is the first attacking option that's came in. I'm not getting into the ins and outs of his numbers, but him plus others that must come in have to, you know, at the end of Lammers, for example, just use him as an example. If at the end of next season Sam Lammers has got similar numbers to Malik Tillman, then I think he's been a good signing, you know. But we need others. Other people need to come up with the goods. I was always a great believer that I wasn't really sure where Malik Tillman's best position was. We had many a chat on a podcast in the group chat after the pods and that sort of thing. I always thought him and Cantwell were effectively fighting for the same shirt sort of thing. I know you can't have too many quality players, but I just think that the way that the both of them sort of play. For a 5 million signing, I think any 5 million signing has to be one of the first names on the team sheet. And I don't think Malik Tillman would have been one of the first names on my team sheet. But as I say, wish him well.
I'd have to agree with that in terms of the size of the fee and having to be in the first name in the team sheet. And it's one of the things we'll talk about very shortly when we come on to the striker debate or the forward line debate, and the amount of money that we're hearing will be invested in the forward line versus what that means for who should be the first choice striker, etc. So I guess let's move on to that, delve a bit deeper into Rangers forward line. I'll start with some of the rumours and some of the stuff that has been appears to have been confirmed or not confirmed on social media. So first one that we heard about was Utrecht striker Tassos Douvikas. Earlier in the week there was a report in Greek media saying that we were preparing an €8 million bid. I think that works out about £6.5–7 million. We're preparing that bid for the Greek striker who'd scored 20 goals for Utrecht in the Eredivisie last year. I think as soon as anyone saw his stats, watched any of his highlights, they were immediately sold on him and said, absolutely, get him in. He's exactly what we need. But we understand that he is not a target for Rangers. Suggestions, I guess, that he's probably a bit too far out of our budget or just out of reach. I think there's a bit of a question there as to should we spent £7 million, £7.5 million on Ryan Kent. Should we be, given where we are and given the level of striker that we as fans feel we need, should we be spending that level of money on a striker? I'll ask you that question in a second, Andy. The other one was Cyriel Dessers, who's long been reported as being getting closer and closer to signing on at Ibrox. It was reported he wants to stay in Italy amid interest from Torino, but since that's been reported, there's a bit of scepticism about the veracity of that report and the how plausible the person who reported it is. So that's one I think we'll still be watching. And the other one was, I think as you mentioned earlier on, Scott, there's a few calls yesterday for Joe Aribo to make his way back to Ibrox, but we understand Joe Aribo's not a target for Rangers this summer, which probably comes as no surprise. And just on that first one though, Tassos Douvikas, he looked a real talent. He's young, he's 23, he's banging the goals in Holland. We've seen how some players have come in from that league and done really well in Scotland. The last player from Utrecht was Michael Moles, so if he followed in those footsteps, then he'd be doing very well. The €8 million rumoured fee, is that the level you think we should be going at for a main striker that's going to, I guess, lead the line and lead the way for us in a title charge?
Yep, I think so. It does sound ever so much. He ticks every other box. He ticks every box apart from the price. There's no secret. We need a striker who's going to score 15, 20, 25 goals a season. We've not bought him yet. We are going to have to spend in order to get that number 9. You have to spread the goals throughout the team. I think he has that to an extent already. I think, but he needs that out now at number 9. This boy ticks all the boxes apart from the price. You can buy a striker, a number 9 for £3.5 million, who will score you 20, 25 goals a season. But he seems to tick all the boxes for me. I don't think it's going to go through. Dessers, I heard yesterday that it was all off, and then the source came under question. I'm glad to hear that because I quite like the look of him. But there's no secret we need somebody. We need a poacher. We need a Chris Boyd to go and score 20, 25 goals a season. Scott said earlier on there, you've lost Tillman's goals. I think you were right. I think it was 12 goals, Scott around 20 goal involvement. So that has to be replaced. Lammers will do that. I think Cantwell will help along the way with that. But we need that number 9. Is €8 million, £6 million too much? Probably. We definitely have to spend, but I don't think we're going to spend that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, Scott, I'm going to come to you next on that one. We've seen a few people in the comments saying that we're still desperately in need of strikers, which I don't think is up for any debate at all. I'm of the view that we need to find that 20, 25 goal a season striker. It's what every club, I guess, strives for, but us more than most. We have had 5-6 years of Alfredo Morelos, who never hit those heights, but he offered us so much more in so many other areas up until the last year and a half or so, and we accepted that. I think now is the time where we've got a clean slate and we need to find that striker outside of Douvikas and potentially Josh Maja. I've not really seen any strikers that have been linked with us that fit that bill. How important is it that we find that Chris Boyd, Ali McCoist-esque style striker that just sits in the penalty area or has that amazing movement that's just a real talent, a real skill, and takes and scores the goals against not only the lesser teams, but can find the back of the net against the likes of Celtic as well.
I thought you were going to burst into song there when you started where he gets the balls and scores the goals, but it's listen, it'll define what happens next season, to be perfectly honest with you. I think that was the fine margins in a lot of the bigger games in the latter part of the season. Big missed chances. You need the guy, the sort of killers that are just, they get one chance and they stick it in the back of the net. I mean, I think the figures are high, but if we make it into the playoff round of the Champions League, you get £5 million. So, you push the boat out, you could effectively pay it off in the month of August by qualifying for the playoff round and then hopefully into the Champions League. But it's every other day there's a name. I must admit I'm not a great one for looking at the stats and clicking on YouTube, and we've been sold many a pony over the years when somebody's looked brilliant on YouTube, and when they've put on a blue jersey, they couldn't do anything, sort of thing, But I was hopeful that we would have had a striker in for the team starting back at the end of next week. There's still time, and as has been said to me many times, the window only just opened, I think about the 14th or 15th, so there hasn't been a lot of deals elsewhere. But I think we need, I personally think we need two starting number nines. I think the way that we played in a lot of the games towards the end of last season, I think Duvikas and Josh Maja would be, that. See if that was £10-12 million that it cost £15 million with everything else, I wouldn't have an issue, because I go back to Walter Smith many years ago, and he only had £5 million to spend or £4 million to spend, and he signed Nikica Jelavic, and he made a difference. So I think, but we sorted the goalkeeper. Defensively, we're all right. Middle of the park, hopefully Cifuentes will come in. So if 80 to 90% of your budget is spent on 2 to 3 strikers, then I'm all for it. And, that will define what we do next season.
I'd have to agree with that, and I would be all for that as well. I mentioned earlier on in the podcast that either Kyle or Ross might be joining us following the fans forum. So I'm just going to add in Kyle now, who's just joined the stream. How are you doing, Kyle?
Not too bad. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, can hear you absolutely fine. Live from the Albion car park, I imagine.
Oh, even closer than that. We're right outside the gates of Ibrox here, just having left the fans forum. It's brilliant. Just checking in, making sure that you're not butchering my Wednesday show, Craig. Yeah?
I'm doing my best. Absolutely trying my best. Andy and Scott are both helping me, actually, to be fair, on that front. So we're trying our best. We'll come on to the fans forum in a minute, Kyle, but always good to involve you in the chat anyway. With that one, we're just talking about Rangers frontline and strikers. I assume that the number 9 position is, and I'm going to come to you for this one, Kyle, I assume the number 9 position remains the main concern in our lineup for you?
100%. Having Alfredo Morelos going out the door, we have got to be looking to fill that position. Do I think Sam Lammers is that out-and-out striker that we need? No, I think he's more of a utility guy. Something that when Cantwell came into the club, he assists the assisters. I think that he's going to be the assister that Cantwell's assisting, if that makes sense. But I don't know what I sort of came on to the end there. We were talking about perhaps Josh Maja coming in. I understand it all depends on Bordeaux and their appeal process, but he is a guy that I would absolutely love to see at Rangers. I know he's been on even since Gerrard's time at the club. I think he was on a list of potential strikers that we should bring in. But yeah, 100%. I hope we address it soon. Obviously, the news about conflicting reports on Dessers perhaps wanting to stay in Italy, and I don't know. I'm sitting in the centre of Glasgow at the minute, and it's absolutely chucking it down. So it's really hard to disagree with them on that point there. But I mean, in terms of a fan base, to be frank, if the guy doesn't want to come here, I'm not interested in him being at the club. So we should move on to the next one. But yeah, we need to get a solid goal scoring centre forward. It should be and must be the top priority for any further transfers.
Yeah, absolutely. I think outside of Dubicas, Josh Maja was the other name that's been mentioned that I think would come in and score a lot of goals for us. He's scored a lot of goals at Sunderland. He's done the same for Bordeaux as well this season. And I think he would absolutely thrive when in the Scottish League. And I guess it would be point still to be proven in Europe on that front. But I think in terms of domestic stuff, he would absolutely take us to the level we want to go. Andy, what are your thoughts on the links to Josh Maja?
I'd love to see him. I was just thinking when you were talking there, Craig, if you think on it, really, 80 to 85% of the teams that visit Ibrox play a low block. I think his game would suit that perfectly well. We've got as Kyle so poetically put it, we've got the assister of the assister of the assister. So if we can get Maja in around that penalty area, there's the word barrowload comes to mind. I've got absolutely no doubt about it. We just have to wait and see how this whole contractual issue pans out. I've tried to get my head around it. I'm reading my head, trying to get there. I'm beginning to understand it a wee bit. I'm quite confident. I'm reasonably confident it should work out all right. I'd love to see him. Be a Rangers player, and there's no doubt about it. He's going to score upwards of 20 goals there. You've heard it here first. That said, I did quote that Ravi Matondo would do the same last year. So we'll just wait and see.
Yeah, we absolutely will wait and see. And I won't ask the question about Lyndon Dykes to anyone here because I know he's a stick on for everyone. So I won't even go to ask the question on that one. Kyle, as you said, you're joining us from the car park just outside Edmiston House. You've just been at the first CEO fans forum. I believe it was a full house. Bygers members only, I think, was the only way you could get a ticket to attend. There's plenty of activity on the TII Twitter account over the last hour and a half or so. My phone is quickly running out of battery just from all the notifications that have been coming through. Can you give us a bit of an overview to start in terms of what the event was like, how it was set up, and who was kind of on the stage from a Rangers perspective?
Yeah, so it was really, really interesting. First of all, really privileged that this is Ibrox is getting to go along to stuff like this and hear what these guys have got to say and for us to get that message out to the supporters as well. It's really important. But in terms of the setup, it was first class. It was in New Edmiston House in the kind of I was going to say concert hall area, if you will. There was 9 chairs on the stage. I wasn't personally expecting there to be that many people on the stage. I was expecting maybe Bisgrove and Greg Marshall, but there was people from all aspects of the club. If you give me 2 minutes, I'll go and flick back my notes and I'll get some of those names. We had Robert Boyle, the head of digital content, Josh Hollywood, who's the head of corporate. What a name that is, by the way. John McFarlane, the facilities manager, Natalie Nairn, the retail partner, David Milburn, who's in customer service, and John Spears, who's head of the disability access. So, I mean, if you had any question about any aspect of the club, there was somebody on that stage to answer it. Everybody introduced themselves, and then there was a wee bit on, the museum was said, and then it was literally the next hour and 15 minutes was opened up to the fans, where everybody had a question answered. There was a couple of wee stories in there and stuff like that as well. But the board, the members that were on stage took time to listen to people, and I thought gave very good answers to what they could. And anything, there was areas where James Bisgrove said, we've got that wrong, when we admit that. And sometimes that's nice to hear that the club accepts things like that. But then on the other hand, it was really, really encouraging to hear some of the sort of stuff going on behind the scenes, just things that I would, from my own personal point of view as a supporter, I would never think of. I'm guessing your next question is going to be, what are some of those things, Craig?
You read my mind on that one. Yes, if you take us through some of the highlights from that one, and we can bring in Andy and Scott and get some opinions afterwards to what James Bisgrove and the rest of the members of the Rangers team had to say in response.
Yeah, so as you mentioned earlier on, there's a really good thread on the This Is Ibrox Twitter. Go and check that out if you haven't already, because my fingers are so sore from typing it up, or just brief notes for Ross to sort of hone in on and put that out on the Twitter sphere for everybody. So go and check that if you haven't. But sort of some of the highlights were, first of all, I mean, if I wasn't excited for the museum already, I'm really, really excited for the museum now. It just seems like it's going to be great, the way it's going to be set up. In terms of some of the stuff from the facilities, it looks like the club's, putting in new undersoil heating. There's going to be upgrades to the press room, talking about upgrades to the lifts. Obviously, we know the upgrades to the disabled facilities that are going to be happening in Ibrox. There was an interesting wee bit as well about the car parking on that as well. Something that maybe I hadn't really caught wind of is that they're going to be trialling singing sections out for the friendlies that we have at Ibrox. Certainly the Hamburg game and Alan McGregor's testimonial against Newcastle. They're going to be putting it in different areas, seeing how that works. Later on in the forum, it was kind of goes hand in hand with the safe standing supporters as well. So the club did acknowledge that not everybody will be happy with it. They will have to move some people, but they will be as accommodating as they can as possible. There was stuff about catering. I think that's a really important point that I didn't realise this as well, but it's a company called Levy we're working with. We're taking home 74% of the profits, which seems to be a good deal on that. There's also, I know this will stand for you and I, Craig, but when we were waiting, they're going to introduce like a kind of McDonald's type self-service thing where you pre-order your stuff and go to a waiting area, and then you can just collect your food at half time, so it saves you waiting in a queue, and it means you can go and talk to your pals, whatever. There was loads of stuff on the travelling support as well. It was good to hear that CTM have been binned, and that they were just unacceptable in terms of supporters going away. We are looking at getting a new partner for that, and that costing for supporters is going to be the main issue. It was really encouraging to hear that there's a Walter Smith statue being commissioned. That work has been ongoing since October. The club, the Smith family, are working with a sculptor. Without getting into too specific on it, I believe that the clay sculptor or the clay sculpture is already well underway in terms of getting made, and hopefully we should see a very, very fitting tribute to one of our greatest ever servants at the club very soon. That was really nice to hear. Talking about brand protection as well, and just talking about it was really interesting to hear that Bisgrove put his hands up and said, I think we did get the Champions League ticketing wrong. That was the first time I've ever heard somebody from the club really saying that, and that I think that'll be an interesting point going forward next season if we do indeed qualify for the Champions League and European tickets. I'm sure there's hundreds that I've missed off of that, but yeah.
Yeah, just on before I come to Andy and Scott, just on the Champions League ticket side of things, was the aspect he thought he got wrong charging a different price depending on where you sat in the stadium, or was it the actual overall cost of the tickets?
I wouldn't like to put words in James Bisgrove's mouth, but I don't think it's charging the different prices depending where you were sat on the stadium. I think it was just kind of the overall pricing of it, and an acknowledgement perhaps that he was aware that Rangers did charge the absolute top that they could charge for it. Yeah,
no, I think that's really interesting, because that was a point that at the time everyone was up in arms about, and it's one that I guess as time goes by, your mind goes on to, well, there's now this problem or that problem or this issue. The team's not playing well in the park, so you forget about these kind of things. So it's good this kind of forum that was highlighted. Andy, I'll come to you first. Kyle's spoke about a wide range of topics there. Was there anything that kind of stuck out to you, or any follow-ups that you want to quiz Kyle on? Really put him on the spot if you can.
Tell you what, it sounds like a fantastic 90 minutes. It sounds like a very, very full 90 minutes. The amount of things that they got through, it's a lot better than I expected. Walter Smith statue, where's it going? Do you know where it's going, Kyle? Did they mention anything like that?
No, they never got into any specifics on that. As I said, they kept a lot of stuff under wraps, but they gave away just enough information on everything, I think, to keep everybody's appetite whetted, to be honest with you. There's obviously some things that they can't talk about. I've no idea, honestly, where it was, but I mean, to your point, it was so good just being in and being part of something like that. And I think I mentioned it in a tweet. nobody shucked away any question. They tried to give an answer, and if they didn't, they said, "You're right. Maybe that's something that the club need to work on." And it was just encouraging to hear that, if you know what I mean.
That's really all you can ask. And if this is the way it's going to be going forward, I think that's a massive thing when it comes to fan engagement. We've all spoke about it for how many years now. Engage with the fans more. They're doing it. I think it's fantastic.
Before I pass over to Scott to get his views, a question that's come up in the comments is around Australia and the Sydney Cup friendly. Was that mentioned at all? Was it asked about?
It was asked about. That came under the sort of brand protection. Again, there was no maybe admittance of fault or anything like that, but I don't know if it's something that we will be doing again. I think that was clear.
Well, that's interesting, and I think music to everyone's ears. I think that it's not something we will be progressing with again. There's always the concern that it was something they would have a go at, but good to hear from that front. Scott, coming over to yourself, Kyle's, as I said, covered quite a bit there. Is there anything that caught your attention and you want to kind of follow up on?
No, I mean, Andy stole my Walter Smith my Walter Smith question. To be honest with you, I mean, from a personal point of view, I would like to see it where the current store is that is going to be redeveloped. I think that where the welcome to Ibrox sign is, I think there for fans that are walking up from the Loudon, the subway sort of thing, I think that would be a nice location for it. Was there anything mentioned around the sports bar? Was there any questions asked about that?
Again, not really. They kind of talked about the Blue Sky Lounge. They talked about, interestingly enough, maybe this is something that I should have said as well, was interesting enough, they did talk about all the ways that they had looked at increasing the capacity of Ibrox. I didn't know that the club had done so much research onto it. I think I've actually got a couple of facts and figures written down in that here. We talked about, stuff like lowering the pitch, but that's going to cost about 15 to 20 million quid. They could get an extra 6,000 seats in there if they'd done that. They talked about, expanding areas in the corner. They could maybe get about 600 seats per corner. But again, that's at like 2.5 million, 3 million quid per corner. Maybe something, as well that they touched on as well that might relate to you, Scott. I know you're with your Majers and all that sort of stuff, is in terms of away allocations, there will be a section for bronze tier members to, ring fenced to them to get an allocation, which I was pretty happy about. And again, they said, we know it's not a perfect system. And they were talking about it being having liaised with other clubs in Europe that have got supporters, incentives like this. That they tried to make it a sort of hybrid system where they want all tiers to be involved, and ultimately they're rewarding loyalty, which still flaws in it for me. But yeah, in terms to your question about the bar, there was nothing specific on that. But yeah, I certainly can see some more. I don't think the club would object to having more areas where punters can buy drinks on a match day.
Cool. Cheers.
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting. One of the comments is actually asking about the sports bar. I believe that's going where the current shop is. Is that correct, Kyle?
I couldn't answer that. I don't know.
I believe it's going where the old retail store is before it moved to houses. It's where I think it is. Kyle, just I guess a final point on tonight. What was the general feeling in the room amongst the fans that were there afterwards? What were the kind of comments you were hearing as people were starting to file out?
Yeah, I think it was well received. Oddly enough, coming out of Ibrox, I didn't hear too much negativity, other than from Ross again talking about how sore his fingers were trying to tweet stuff and things like that. But there was a positivity, overall when we came out there. Again, I can only take my hat off that nobody shucked away from any of the questions that they were getting asked. They really tried to answer it. It was it was a lot more informal than I thought it was going to be. They had 3 rows of seats, and then they had like sort of picnic benches out. They had free food on for everybody, and it was just informal. The other thing I really liked as well was they had I can't remember the exact terminology that was used for it, but they had people that were not on the stage, that if you had any specific or individual issues, you could go up and speak to them. And I certainly, at the end of it, there was a lot of people in engagement, obviously talking about issues that are personal to them. And in fact, that there was members from the stage down, mingling with people as well and listening to them. I noticed Greg Marshall in about talking to people, which is I'm sure is good to see. As I know that's been a criticism levelled at him, that he's maybe not as accessible as other SLOs are, but in that forum, I thought he was good and he spoke really well and seemed to be really, really engaging with people at the end.
That's really good to hear. And am I right in saying these are quarterly? So it'll be another 3 months or so until the next one?
Yeah, it was Nick Thompson actually said 2 months at the end of that. So I don't know, but yeah, I think in the literature it does say quarterly, but they're at 2 months. So who knows? The more of these things we have, the better, I think.
Absolutely. I think I said earlier in the week the club had a very low bar to start from, but it seems that it's got off on the right foot, and it really seems to have been a positive. And it's like you said earlier, it's been a privilege for us at TII, yourself and Ross, to go along and be invited to go along and share the messages that are coming out and ensure that it's not just the people in the room that are hearing what's going on, but the wider Rangers support as well. So that's been really positive. Kyle, thank you very much for that. If you're welcome to join us for one last point on the podcast, if you wish. One of your favourite players to pronounce, Jose Cifuentes, has been he's played 67 minutes for Ecuador against Costa Rica in their final game of the international break, and it was said today that everything's been arranged for him to go to Glasgow Rangers. Just one last economic detail is missing between the clubs. Andy, I'll come to you first on that one. It seems this one's been going on for ages, but thankfully, going by that statement, it's almost over the line.
You know yourself, Craig, there's deals that take a few weeks in the summertime that you've got no hope for, and there's deals that take a few weeks in the summertime that you're fully confident it's going to happen, and I think this is the latter, and I'm delighted with that. It really does sound like a case of when, not if now, to get Cifuentes in, and that then it begins to look like a brand new middle of the park, which we all agree we need. We need a kind of a new central midfield there. He's a player. He's a player, and he's going to be excellent for us. It's good to see that he's going to be on his way.
Yeah, absolutely. Scott, I think a new midfield was one of the areas that was going to be welcome. Striking positions have obviously taken priority in a lot of people's minds because we like to see goals scored, and we want to see goals scored that will mean Rangers are lifting a silver trophy at the end of the year. But it does seem that he's a very different player to something that we have in the team already. I mean,
I watched something this morning that spoke very positively about him. I think number 8, but I think can play as a 10. I think we've had obviously Stephen Davis, Scott Arfield, likely Glenn Kemar. So there's been a lot of change, or there is going to be a lot of change there, and I think a fresh dynamic, somebody that's just got a bit about him and energetic and offers different skill sets, so I'm delighted that one's hopefully going to be over the line in the next few days, and then they can concentrate on getting a couple of strikers in.
Yeah, absolutely. Final word on this one to you, Kyle. Is he a player that excites you? We might well have lost Kyle. He was on his final leg of battery, and he looks thoroughly confused. So we'll leave Kyle on that one. We're pretty much at the hour mark, so I think we'll round off the podcast there. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening. Andy, thank you very much for joining us. Good to see you back.
Anytime, thoroughly enjoyed it.
And Scott, same to yourself.
It's been great. Could have, as I often say, we could have went on for another half hour to an hour. There's so much to talk about, but great to be back.
Absolutely, and the team will be back on Sunday again for that one. Kyle, I'm not sure if you can hear me, but thank you very much for your update from the fans forum. It was really great to hear straight after it's finished how well it's gone down and how well it's been received, and hopefully we'll see much more communication from the club in that manner. That suggests to me that Kyle cannot hear me, so you can watch that one back. So thank you very much, everyone, for listening. Please drop a like on the video if you've enjoyed the content. It really does help us. Please also remember to subscribe to the TII YouTube channel so you get a notification every single time we go live. In terms of what's coming up, Scott Patterson will be making his return to the podcast as host on Sunday night, along with the team to I imagine, discuss many of the new rumours and pieces of news that comes out of Rangers over the next few days. As we said at the very start, it's never a dull day to be a Rangers supporter, and it's never a quiet day either. So I imagine there'll be plenty to talk about. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening, and until next time, goodbye.